We're here with Senator Perdue. You saw the health care legislation from the majority leader. Do you like it?
Yes. I mean, this thing continues to evolve, but I think we're getting to a point now where we're very, very close. I remain hopeful, and I think we've got something now that we can work with. I'm really hopeful we'll get motion to proceed early next week. We'll get the CBO scores hopefully Monday, and then move on to this bill next week.
Well, let me ask you about this room for error, because already we've seen comments from Senator Rand Paul, more conservative member, as well as Senator Susan Collins, a more centrist member, in your party saying that they're not on board. So if one more vote comes out against this, it would be dead.
Well, perfection is really difficult to achieve, and that's why we've been working so hard. But let's remember what we're working with. We have a crisis on our hands. Obamacare is collapsing after 6 or 7 years. I mean, just this week, we've got some information. Senator Daines from Montana has been asking from the IRS for months, and we finally got the information that in 2014, that's the latest information they can give us. That tells you something right there. But in 2014, the IRS fined 8 million people in this country because they couldn't sign up for insurance under Obamacare. And it was $1.8 billion. And 85% of those 8 million people make less than $50,000, and half of them make less than $25,000.
Senator, you know this, but there are portions of the majority leader's bill that would actually keep in place some of the taxes from the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. Does that frustrate you as a Republican?
Well, yeah, of course it does. I mean, we want to repeal as much as we can repeal. But remember...
Is this a full repeal?
What is the definition of full repeal? What we've got to do is fix the problem that's out there right now. We've got to make sure people continue to get access, or will get access. Remember, there are 28 million people still today in America after the Affordable Care Act who still don't have access to insurance. 28 million. You've got to look at the affordability. I mean, premiums are up over 105% nationwide. In my state alone, just this year, they're up over 40%. You've got to make sure that pre-existing conditions get dealt with, and Medicaid's got to be put on a sustainable path. Remember, one of the big fallacies of Obamacare is it would kill Medicaid over the long term. There was no way it could be sustained over the long term.
But there are portions of this bill that say that there's not enough. You talk to a centrist governor like Governor Kasich from Ohio, who says that the $45 billion for opioid addiction that are in this bill is a drop in the ocean, so to speak, in terms of actually combating that problem. Does that frustrate you?
Well, there's never enough for some people who want an unlimited amount of money flowing out of the federal coffers here in the federal government. Let me give you two numbers, though. California got $23 billion from the federal government just for the Medicaid expansion, and Ohio alone was number 2 at $4 billion. All the rest of the states...
For opioid addiction?
No, for their Medicaid expansion.
Well, what about opioid
the $45 billion that we're talking about right now is what he's talking about. Of course, we'd all like more, but we can't afford that. So we're trying to do the best we can to make sure we sustain the market, stabilize it, give people access, and get after the affordability of this thing.
Well, let's turn now to Federal Reserve Chairwoman Janet Yellen, who testified before the Senate Banking Committee. You're a member of that committee. She talked about opioid addiction being a lagging role on the economy. What did you make of her testimony earlier today?
Well, I think there's some big takeaways. Number one, she acknowledged that the economy wants to turn, that the consumer confidence is up, unemployment is down and below 5%. But there are some real question marks on the economy. She's beginning to think that you're going to bring the balance sheet of the Fed down. We don't know how far, but she said significantly over the next year or two. Well, that raises questions. If you don't do some things with Dodd-Frank to free capital up in the banking system, and you don't give confidence to the business community so they invest again, you could be in a real capital crisis here in the next year or two.
Senator, the president has a decision to make about whether to keep Janet Yellen heading the Federal Reserve. Would you like to see her reinstated?
Well, I'd like more information. I've only been dealing with her for the last 2 years, but right now I'm very concerned that there's not a balance sheet plan long term. And what that means is we've got almost $20 trillion in 4 different central banks: Europe, Japan, China, and the United States. Those are the largest central bank balance sheets in history. And now we have one of those central banks unilaterally talking about reducing the size of that balance sheet, which I support. The problem is, if everybody did it at the same time, imagine what that would do to the liquidity of the globe.
Well, let's talk about, do you think that there's been some talk that Gary Cohn could be the person to lead the Federal Reserve? Do you think he would do a good job, or would you like to see someone from the administration, or what type of person would you like to see leading the bank?
Well, I think somebody we're way ahead of ourselves here, Kevin, but, I think at this point she's still got another 2 years, I think, or at the end of next year, I guess. So I've heard a couple of names mentioned. Certainly, Cohn would be an extremely qualified person. I want somebody that understands the full breadth of global finance.
Yeah. And just quickly, the Congressional Budget Office scoring the budget from the administration likes this budget score. What do you make of that? Have you been aware of that?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm very frustrated with this is Congress's Congressional Budget Office. I mean, they missed the number of people that were supposed to sign up for Obamacare by 12 million people. This 22 million person number that they use right now, people are going to lose their insurance, is a totally wrong number, incorrect number. And so I've got some issues. We've got to tighten that whole thing. They're telling us it's going to take 8 weeks to get some of the models done that we need done right now. And I come from the real world. Well, it just doesn't take that long.